Haere mai, welcome to the Southland Flood Control and Drainage Management Bylaw hearing. It's quite a mouthful. Just before we go any further, I'll start with a little whakatauki that I think is supremely relevant. Whakarongo ki te hau ki te raki, which translates to listen to the winds from all directions. So highlighting the necessity of considering diverse viewpoints and gathering comprehensive information before acting, which I think exemplifies the purpose of today's hearing. So we are here to listen to all views and do our best to come up with a balanced and suitable conclusion that is workable for everybody. So thank you. Again, welcome. Just a couple of things that we need to cover off, like housekeeping. Fire exit is at the front of the chamber. There are a few extension cords, so just be mindful of those. The bathrooms are out the way you came in. The men's is right by the entryway, and the unisex toilet is out in reception. We're planning on having a break at 11 for morning tea, and coffee and tea will be available through the door to the side. Water is also available on my left, your right. So, as you are all well aware, or we wouldn't be here, the purpose of the hearing is to hear from submitters regarding the flood control and drainage management bylaw. I really appreciate the feedback we've had and the submissions that we've had, and really want to thank submitters online and in person for taking the time, firstly to submit, and secondly to join us to help us understand your submissions and to answer any of our questions. On that, a reminder to submitters that this isn't a debate. We are able to ask you questions. The hearing process, as it is, means that you can't necessarily ask questions. But we are here to ask questions of clarification from your submissions, many of which are very comprehensive and express your views quite clearly. So if there are not a huge number of questions after your presentation, that probably means that your submission told us everything we need to know, but there's always something. What else? Oh, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Councillor Lyndall Ludlow, fourth term councillor. Had sat on a number of resource consent hearings, plan change hearings and plan hearings, so that's a privilege for me to be chairing today's proceedings. On my right we have...
my name is Paul Evans, councillor for Fiordland. First time on a hearing of any sort, so looking forward to it.
Thanks, Paul.
And I'm Councillor Phil Morrison. I'm also Deputy Chair at the Council, second term councillor, and limited experience with hearings, but very interested in understanding how to strike the right balance in this case.
Thanks, team. Just also a reminder to submitters that you have 10 minutes. That's the process. So you can use your 10 minutes to speak to us, but ideally you would allow 5 minutes for illuminating your submission, and give us 5 minutes to ask you any questions. Lauren's got some kind of alarm that you'll hear at 5 minutes, just so that we don't want you to be alarmed necessarily, but there'll be a noise at 5 minutes to give you an idea of how much time you've used and whether you want to conclude your comments or not. It's entirely up to you, but we're on quite a tight schedule, and so if you use up 9 of your minutes, it only allows us 1 minute to ask you any questions, and we will have to be fairly tight on that. So apologies if I have to cut you off, but we need to be fair to all submitters, so allow the correct amount of time for everybody and not have people running late because you've all given up your valuable time to be here. So anything else from either of you? Great, let's make a start then, and somewhere in my vast array of pieces of paper, we need to move some recommendations first so that we can proceed. And before I hand over to Vicky to present your staff report, there are a number of recommendations. The first one is that we note the proposed Southland Flood Control and Drainage Management Bylaw has undergone a special consultative procedure under Section 83 of the Local Government Act 2002, and submissions have been received. So I will move that we do that. Councillor Morrison is seconding, and we are all saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Against? Okay, thank you. Secondly, I accept the 3 late submissions received on the proposed Southland Flood Control and Drainage Management Bylaw after the closing of the consultation period. The only comment I would make about that is it's not my habit to accept late submissions, because late means late. But under the circumstances, there was some slightly extenuating circumstances, so it's suitable that we do that.
I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. You can do it. Councillor Morrison, all those in favour, please say aye. The third recommendation is to receive the 17 submissions on the proposed Southland Flood Control and Drainage Management Bylaw.
I'm happy to move that one.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Seconded, Councillor Evans. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry, this is a bit strange, isn't it? And recommendation 4 is to consider submissions received to inform recommendations on the proposed Southland Flood Control and Drainage Management Bylaw, which is what we're doing today. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Seconded, Councillor Morrison. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We do have another recommendation, but we can't do that till the end of the day because we need to hear from you all and make any recommendations and amendments to the staff recommendations. So with that, I would like to ask Collard to present the staff report. Thank you.
So the circulated hearing report contains the submissions that were received on the bylaw. It provides a summary of those submissions, and it also presents my recommendations. I've also included in the documentation an amended version of the bylaw based on my recommendations, and you will find a copy of the legal opinion that was also relied on. There were a number of submission points received that were outside of the scope of what can be considered under the bylaw today, and I've addressed these points in a supplementary report. This report doesn't identify individual submission points, but rather sets out some of the other projects that the council is responsible for that may address issues that were raised that cannot be considered through this process. So the Flood Control Bylaw has been prepared under the Local Government Act, which provides the council with powers to make a bylaw in relation to flood protection and flood control works. The purpose of this bylaw is to manage, regulate and protect flood protection and flood control works undertaken by or under the control of the council to ensure the integrity and effective operation of those works. So any recommendations that I've made in my reports reflect the purpose of the bylaw, which is to ensure that the council's flood protection network is protected from damage and misuse, so it's able to function as it's intended, which is to safeguard people, property and livelihoods. You will have noted in the hearing report and the appended documents that 2 of the recommendations that I have put forward differ from what was proposed in the bylaw. I'd like to briefly take you through those 2 changes. So the proposed bylaw, the does not have maps included in it, but rather refers to maps that sit externally on the council's online mapping system. Through the submissions, concerns were raised about the potential for maps to be amended without going through any form of consultation with landowners, which could impact people's properties as well as change landowners' obligations. Transparent decision-making of the council is a point that was raised in submissions, and it's my recommendation that the maps be included in the bylaw itself, along with an explanatory note that provides information to bylaw users that if the maps need to be amended in the future, then consultation will occur, and this can happen outside of a full bylaw review process. The exact wording that I've proposed for the explanatory note can be found in paragraph 28 of the hearing report. I've also recommended that the proposal to include an exemption clause for council staff be rejected. The current bylaw requires the council to gain an authority to under the bylaw to undertake activities that do not meet the standards of the bylaw. This proposed bylaw includes a clause that allows the council to carry out activities in the floodway without gaining prior authority. There are other councils around the country that have similar exemptions in their bylaws, so this isn't a new situation. Through the consultation process, there were a number of submission points that raised concern around the level of oversight and transparent decision-making and what that would look like if the council was not going through an authorisation process for its own work programs. To address the concerns around transparency, it's my recommendation that the exemption clause not be included in the bylaw and that the council continues with the process that it's currently using. If the recommendation from the panel today is to retain that exemption clause, which is the proposed clause 4.1, then I've included some amendments to that clause to make it clear that it is only applicable to activities that are set out in section 4 of the bylaw, and that the council is not excluding itself from any other requirements. The proposed amendment that I've suggested is at paragraph 32 of the hearing report. But I'd also like to make one additional minor change to that amendment, that paragraph 32. And that's where it's stated that nothing in section 4 of this bylaw applies to the council. I would like to amend that to read that nothing in section 4.2 of this bylaw applies to the council. So other than the 2 points that I've just raised, I will take the rest of the report and supporting documents as read.
Questions from the panel?
Oh, that was very clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any other. Thanks, Vicky. It's encouraging, I think, for submitters that we're willing to make changes if necessary. So thank you for your input. We are perhaps running ahead of time. Do you have anything else?
I'm just noting that we have Win Williams online, so if there was any questions for them, they are available at the moment.
I did have a question. Which piece of paper did I write it on?
Very good giving us paragraph numbers too, I must say.
Who's there? Oh, hello. Morena, Win Williams. Nice to see you. My question is around the revocation section. Could you just explain that? It's kind of it's a little bit of a double negatives situation. So I wonder if you could perhaps explain your advice on that part, please.
Through the chair, to clarify, the deeming provision that was contained in the previous bylaw is not sought to be brought through to the new proposed bylaw. The advice we gave was to provide clarification that under the previous bylaw, as deeming authorities were not decisions made or authorities granted, effectively the new revocation and transitional clause in the proposed bylaw does not carry through the deemed authorities. So from a practical perspective, any activities that were being carried out as deemed authorities, if they contravene an activity that is otherwise prohibited in the new bylaw, that person would need to apply for an authorization.
Okay. Does it? So in practical terms, if you've already got an authority in the 2020 bylaw, if that does not meet the new bylaw requirements, you would need to apply for a new one. Is that the only way that works, or have I missed something?
Only for deemed activities. So if there is any authority previously granted will continue for that activity. If there's a change in scope of the activity being undertaken, or an activity that's currently being undertaken as a deemed activity, then a new authorization will be required.
Can you also explain the 12-month period that sits alongside that? Or am I confused? Let me see. Well, maybe that was a different section.
I didn't pick up any
Okay,
time constraint.
No.
Legal advice document.
no.
Through the chair, that relates to earlier authorities granted under the 2010 bylaw that carried through as a result of the transitional provision in the 2020 bylaw. So the effect of this clause is a transitional provision to stipulate that any authorities that carried over from the previous 2020 bylaw will now cease 12 months once the proposed bylaw comes into effect.
Thank you. Yep, lovely. Thank you. Anything from you, Jim?
No, I couldn't see it on here anyway. So.
Thanks, Wynne Williams. Appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hawkins, are you there? Because we might make a start if she's there.
Just let me know that she might be on a little bit closer to 10. I can see that our second submitters are here in the room, so we can swap the order.
Mr. and Mrs. MacPherson, would you like to leap the queue and take advantage of the time now? Thank you. Just a reminder that you have 10 minutes and that we'll follow up with any questions that we have. Thanks very much for giving up your time this morning and to submit, of course.
Can I just get myself sorted?
Absolutely.
With the cooperation.
Just to note for everybody that although we're looking at our screens, we're not on Facebook, even though we fit the demographic of looking at Facebook. We've got you in front of us so that we don't have to turn around and behind.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Lauren, you're right with that?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
We've got the map there being shared.
Thank you. I'm Denise MacPherson from Hedgehog Spring Hills. My submission today is for clarity in the naming of the Makariri River waterways. We can look on many maps with one is behind you and read different things, especially below where the river passes Highway 96 going south. When deciding on works programs on the rivers, what gets priority? Can the old river be tidied up just to a narrow ditch to make natural drainage for the area? Willows removed from the banks of rivers, lower stop banks in some areas made higher. Study of the last floods to see how each time they change their breakouts that make the difference in what happens. The channel, which if you look above that map, the blue is what is officially on most of your maps saying where the river flows. But if you look to the wiggly line and go to the left, you will see that there is a darker line. Now that is called the channel. The flood channel's official name. The channel was deepened and widened in a very progressive works done on the Macquarie River in the 1960s. The Macquarie flood-free scheme it was. It has been very successful, but it still isn't classified as the river. Maybe the local farmers bordering the river wanted the river to be the source of stock water. Now in practice that is illegal. Maps frequently suggest there is no flow and no flooding in the channel, and the channel is 3 kilometres in length at its beginning at Highway 96 as the flood channel, and it has low grass-covered stock banks that are effective to the last 500 metres before it joins the Macquarie River. Again, if you go right down, you can see where it's straight and it still wiggles. It joins the Macquarie River where it breaches its stock banks. Maybe that was to protect the bridge, which has now been taken away. The Macquarie River is cut off where the channel begins and the riverbed receives local drainage, mostly from tile drains. It meanders for 13 kilometres from that pink mark at the top of the screen, which is actually Highway 96. So that's where it begins. It meanders in 13 kilometres in a series of stagnant ponds polluted by ducks and small rivulets between as it twists and turns and passing through choked waterways, willow and grasses, etc., to the official outlet where enough water flows to cover your foot. And we have photos of that to show you. In times of high flooding, yes, the Macquarie River has floodwater, but it can't flow because of the vegetation in the riverbed and the twists and turns. A couple of these have been cut through, but not enough. It just fills and covers the surrounding land. Willows, crack willows are growing on the banks of the waterways and now in the rivers and streams. The roots also found up the tile drains, blocking them too. Warren and I farm on the Macquarie River and border the Macquarie flood channel to the west, the Headchope stream to the east, blocked off Macquarie River to the north and the old Headchope River to the south. And through the middle is the Macquarie River meandering 13 kilometres. An area you could be confused referencing, but that is not to mention the old Headchope riverbed. What is the official waterway of the Macquarie River? Can these areas be narrowed and straightened with a loop around? The water could flow more easily and remove the stagnant water and a constant worry of E. coli, polluted from the colonies of ducks and now rapidly increasing Canadian geese, calling the old river home. Remember that one duck is the same daily output of E. coli as 15.7 dairy cows, and this is Dean Carson's research done for you in 2016. While there is such confusion over the official river and old rivers, how can Environment Southland pan with full effect the need for stop banking and clearance of willows on the rivers? Allowance must be made to allow for clearing out weeds, straightening and narrowing of mostly almost obsolete waterway areas, so not just forgotten passages meandering through productive land. Please clarify the correct names of the main waterways in use today, and your planning in the future, I'm sure, could be helped. Maps are used extensively for planning and permits, and they must be accurate. We know every flood affects different areas differently. That is nature. The willows today are our biggest enemy for smoothly flowing rivers. I would quite like now we could look at some of these photos. They're not going to be in order, but with that one you've seen there before, it may help.
that the beginning of the channel when
I,
they warmed it up?
yes, yep.
Technology.
Yeah, technology.
Lucky we're ahead of schedule.
Well, that there is the actual very beginning where it is chopped off at the bridge on the Highway 96. And we have some other photos later on that shows you looking down the channel, which is directly at right angles from that. Next one, please. That is much lower down where it's meandering, just where it does all these twists and turns, comes completely back on itself. You can see how full it is choked. If that was a digger went up there, you'd probably drop that by a metre, maybe two. Yes, please. And that's just more dead willows and brush that's in the streams. Just quite quickly. This one here, it opens out at times and then you get covered in weed, but you can see that there's willows have fallen over in that photo as well. Now this piece here is quite interesting. That is where, there is audio with this, isn't there?
Yeah. That's at the bottom.
Yeah, that is the actual channel, river, the big piece. And is the audio on that or not?
I don't think that's going to come through the system.
And this little piece on the left is the official river coming into the channel.
And that is, if you stand in it, it's in that water coming out of the official Macquarie River is hardly enough to go over the top of your toes on your gumboots.
Well, we've got a photo of that.
So the water that's going down there is all local drainage. And with the amount of willows and stuff in that in the old riverbed, the main Macquarie River, is that it is blocking our tile drains, and our production on our farm relies very heavily on tile drains.
Have you got that next one?
I have tried to.
So you can see the gumboots there. He's actually, that's our son taken 2 or 3 days ago. That's him actually standing in where the outlet is. And if you look there, in fact, in the speaking, which isn't coming up, the actual Macquarie River, you look at the flowing, it's actually flowing back up there that day. Must have been slightly higher than it was. So that's looking up. That's the official joining of the Macquarie River again.
So consequently, the maintenance of this whole riverbed is so costly because it is so wide, unnecessarily wide, for all of the water it runs is from tile drains, and that's coming predominantly from all of our property. We're on both sides of this old riverbed. I try to maintain, keep the willows down, but it needs to be dealt with professionally and legalised, that it is no longer the river, so that we can do something with it. And I'm prepared to do that, like I have done with the old Hedgehoe River, which was, it is just classified now as a backwash. And I maintain that with very good results. So it's the same thing that needs to be done with this. It needs to be had the classification of it being the main Macquarie River is an absolute joke. It is no longer the main river.
Thank you. In the interests of
Until it's legalised, it is very hard to make any progress on how to maintain it, and at great cost.
in the interests of getting a question in before the time runs out, I just want to be to clarify that as far as the bylaw itself goes, you are in support of the contents of the bylaw, but you have some.
We have reservations about the fact that it's changes on different maps that you look at. you don't know. A lot of them are just,
The floodway,
the floodway to me
Drainage.
is the main,
river.
it's the main body of water. But
right,
if you're looking up a map, you would consider the zigzag one is the main one because frequently the channel, there's nothing.
Okay.
Doesn't even show that it exists. So maps are very confusing and the maps that I've used have come from your websites.
okay, thank you. Councillor Morrison, did you have a question?
I'm just trying to grapple with the challenge of, this is clearly a highly modified section of the waterways, and of course, and I'm just thinking out loud here as I explore this, there's the peak periods of flood events, which kind of the flood protection is designed for those peak periods, and then of course there's a huge amount of time when we're not in the flood situation, and I'm just understanding how the bylaw intersects with this challenge of understanding where does the water actually want to go during normal times and where does it want to go during flood periods, and understanding how we might respond to that challenge in the future. I'm a poorly framed question, I know. So yeah, I mean, and is there things that the bylaw, if we made amendments to the bylaw, would make this situation more manageable for us collectively in the future?
Well, it just seems so ironical that we have to, put on permits for everything else like that. We don't even know how we classify these things because it's mixed with you.
So part of it is the definitions
Yes.
challenge.
And
The definition of what is the river, and that river is no longer fits the purpose.
So if you're working out your flooding schemes and all that sort of thing,
How can you work it out?
because if you go and have a look on it in that section there, frequently it says may even say channel, but it doesn't show that, give it any colour to show that it has any water in it. And when you look at where the flooding goes, the flooding is only on the zigzaggy piece, which is accurate. The channel isn't, but it doesn't even really showing it's got any flow. So,
Okay,
quite confusing.
yeah, no, thank you. In the interest of time, Councillor Evans, do you have a?
Well, just one. Would you be keen if we presented this to the catchment team and worked on this as council to clarify?
As part of the wider work
Yeah,
program.
as part of the wider work program.
Yes, I
Paul,
think
Paul Pollard,
Paul Pollard. Yeah.
As a catchment, yeah.
because he's been trying to maintain a monstrous old riverbed with very little money. For what purpose, other than just to, it doesn't form a purpose because it needs to be narrowed up to make a decent flow of water that is going down there instead of a whole lot of ponds that are just riddled with ducks and Canadian geese. And that water in there is as foul as you could possibly be.
But then when it goes through the other pieces, it comes out quite clear,
Thank you. I am going to have to cut you off, sorry.
Okay.
But your point made, thank you. And the role of the definitions might be the most relevant part of the bylaw discussion. So thank you very much for your time. There will be an outcome and I'm sure you'll be advised of that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. It was very interesting.
Mrs. Hawkins, are you there? Mr. and Mrs. perhaps, I'm not sure. Change my view, sorry.
No, I think she's got her section today, so she'll be just. Find the right number.
Kia ora, Mrs. Hawkins, nice to see you. Just a reminder that you have 10 minutes. I'm not sure whether you'll hear Lauren's little beepy thing at 5 minutes. And a reminder, of course, that this is not a debate. We'll ask you some questions if we've got time at the end. So take it away. Oh, now you're frozen.
Thank you, Chair. Tēnā koutou katoa Tānia Hawaii, coming through okay?
A little bit patchy, actually. We do in the, at the worst, we have your speaking notes, so if things go slightly sideways, we do have those. But give it another try, will you please?
Okay, I might have to come back on a better internet, but I am in a hotel lobby and it's supposed to be okay. Tēnā koutou katoa ko Tania Hawkins toko wā. Thank you for the opportunity to present our views on the efficacy of the current and proposed flood control bylaw. I want to highlight the key issues raised in our submission across 3 key areas. First one is avoidance of risk. Regional Policy Statement 2017 has committed Southern Regional Council to avoid where possible all risks from natural hazards and riverbeds before attempting to mitigate them. And I think the words are all practical attempts to avoid risk. We submit, therefore, that there is no need for any significant gravel storage in floodways, hence the avoidance of risk. Consents issued around the period 2010 that we've read and were familiar with specified absolute 0 cubic metres of gravel to be stockpiled in the floodway. The 2020 bylaw updated and debated in that council chamber that you're in there adopted a limit of 400 cubic metres. Yet today, individual exemptions have allowances of up to 25,000 metres against those original consents and the 400 metres adopted by the bylaw. And the question we put to you as councillors is why? From 2013 to 2023, we were unsuccessful as landowners in getting any traction with the council around the non-compliant storage of thousands of metres of gravel. Our continual querying of non-consented stockpiles, particularly post-Cyclone Gabriel, resulted in compliance activity, but the stockpiles weren't removed, the paperwork was changed. This is analogous to increasing the speed where drivers are constantly infringing. Community safety must be put ahead of commercial convenience and the profit of unrelated organisations. The genuine concerns for property and personal fears for safety of nearby landowners need to be respected and acted on. Point 2, integration with other regulations. This bylaw, as all the bylaws in regional councils, are a carryover from the catchment board era. Regional councils today, however, have far wider obligations. The bylaw alone cannot satisfactorily discharge those obligations. The bylaw is designed to protect council assets only. And that is the crux of our argument. Decisions about gravel stockpiling at scale with direct implications for community safety must continue to go through the consenting team, not the catchment team alone. The consenting team successfully integrates inputs from all teams and assesses applications against council's full gambit of statutory obligations. They do this for every other consent. Gravel storage at scale should not be carved out of that process. This is not a criticism of individuals, it is a structural governance issue. Therefore, the deeming provision must remain from the current bylaw. Minor matters can be covered by the bylaw. The gravel at scale, or gravel storage at scale, was never envisaged. This is a consenting issue that should be overseen by the whole of the regulatory process. There is, in addition, a significant regulatory gap. Commercial gravel contractors who operate within the floodway, but outside their riverbed, are normally just transporting in, washing and selling gravel. These people are not subject to ES consenting for gravel storage because they're outside of technically of the riverbed. It is essential that council extend consent conditions for gravel washing to include gravel stockpiling, and that these are the same conditions applied for stockpiling associated with the riverbed. Now, saying all that, I'll take you back to our first proposition, is that there's no need for this to happen within a riverbed or a floodway. But should council disagree with us, we're saying to you that it needs to be within the purview of the consents team. Item number 3, there is no risk lens being applied in our view. Risks within floodways, and it is an organisational risk that council is currently blind to. Council's Risk and Assurance Committee is developing an organisational risk framework. The independent chair recently stated that risk management must happen throughout the organisation. The Risk and Assurance Committee desires to embed risk management throughout the organisation. Yet we see no organisational risk management lens, no stock take of all risks, no governance oversight reporting for the operations and gravel stockpiling that currently occurs within the floodways. There is no governance oversight reporting on bylaw exemptions granted and conditions attached, or the consents granted and those retrospectively granted for gravel storage. There's no oversight of locations and quantities of gravel. There's no understanding of potential and cumulative downstream effects, and the condition of flood banks and risk to the community and the remediation plans in place. These are all missing from council scrutiny. Council must not be complacent in the face of ever increasing and extreme weather events. And just today, unfortunately, in the North Island, again, a massive weather event hitting our friends, our whānau up there. We cannot expect that this will not eventually work its way down the South Island in time. Therefore, we ask the panel to recommend to council these points, that the overall floodway risk management, the regulation and compliance of, be added to the Audit and Risk Committee work program, with an independent review by PwC or equivalent undertaken as soon as possible. That the details of the flood bank condition, ratings, scores, and locations be reported quarterly through to the Integrated Catchment Committee and annually through the Audit and Risk Committee through their audit program. That full reporting of the same committees on all the currently consented and exempted gravel stockpiles, along with the supporting technical assumptions and assessments, where there were some, be presented to these committees before this bylaw is actually finalised. That the deeming provision be retained. That gravel storage and allied machinery usage continue to be a consenting process and not be devolved down to simply a bylaw exemption. And that gravel stockpiling outside the riverbed, and again, we disagree, but should council disagree with us, that become a consented activity and have the same scrutiny and risk management as any other gravel storage within the riverbed. Thank you, Chair. It's my presentation. I have some notes that I've attached to the bottom of the presentation outlining what the flood flows are in 20, 100 years and the maximum possible flood in the Arete. The reason I've included those is because risk assessment is totally dependent on assumptions. And if you want to put all these things through a technical assessment, the crux of this matter, the one that the councils have to agree on, is what are your assumptions? What risk is the community prepared to accept? Thank you.
Thank you. A thorough and knowledgeable submission. Questions?
Tanya, thank you. Within the bylaw as it's currently framed, do you think there's an opportunity to distinguish between, say, temporary and limited gravel storage versus hazardous, or what might represent hazardous storage? And I guess connected to that, and noting your final point around assumptions pertaining to particular catchments, do you think there's a second question, do you think there's a need to differentiate on a catchment basis as to what represents a risk threshold?
So to answer the first question, we're not averse to all gravel storage, and I think I said that in the full submission, is that if there's a genuine extraction consent, then there is a practicality of having some local storage for simply for the act of drying before transport, and the exemption currently recognises that. And we did say in the submission that we're open to the council reviewing that if they think that practical amount is actually smaller than it could be. The really important part of gravel storage, which came out of the review by Matt Gardner, was that it's critical how the gravel was stored. And we're very, very critical of exceptions where gravel was stored across the floodway or on boundary. So these very practical things need to be dealt with. But yes, I think there's room there for some operating storage. What we're against is the massive mountains that build up for commercial operators who are operating far beyond simple extraction. In terms of the catchments, I'm not a technical person, but I do value the work that's been undertaken by your flood team, Joe Patterson and Matt Gardner. They're the people to input into a risk review and to provide you with information as to the movement of these piles. And Matt Gardner wrote in his epic McGregor study that wasn't really picked up by your team, is that gravel piles do scour and they do move, and that's the crux of our argument. Looking at Hawke's Bay, the amount of sediment that moved in massive floods cannot be underestimated.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkins, did you have anything?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Hawkins. I understand where you're coming from regarding the risk, and also not only for gravel storage. Would this be also, if there was river works done on the rivers, that spoil or skimming be taken out of the floodways and not dumped further in the floodways?
Yeah, anything that can be washed away. And yes, piles of your analyst, when Vicky wrote on the report, that agreed with our contention that that sand, soils and light gravels are the greatest risk. And yes, so anything we're putting in the floodway, and I have very vivid images of machinery wrapped around houses in Hawke's Bay, and you can see in the photos that if you've got an operating gravel extraction or a gravel processing operation, you have machinery, and it's permanent in the floodway. And I think these are the things the councillors have to decide. We don't have houses in our floodways, but we have bridges, we have property still and assets belonging to independent landowners. Yes.
Sorry, I wanted to cut you off. I don't have any further questions. My colleagues have asked them. So thank you very much for your time and your submission. And you'll hear from us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That brings us to the Invercargill City Council submission, please. Caroline and Rhiannon, welcome to the table. Thank you. Take it away.
Tuna koutou, Korean Suta Toka Inua. I'm the Strategy, Policy and Engagement Manager at ICC.
Tuna koutou, Caroline Rain Toka Inua. I'm the Parks and Recreation Manager for
Flooding and flood control obviously is a region-wide issue, has network implications, and we really value the relationship that we have with Environment Southern in terms of the management of that issue. Much of the flood control network does rest on Invercargill City Council land, either road reserve or parks reserve. And so we're here to speak to a range of matters in relation to the bylaw. I'll just touch on a couple of high-level general points. We do support the removal of maps from the bylaw, but we just request that ICC is kept proactively up to date to ensure that our records are aligned. We would not, however, support the removal of Environment Southern officers from coverage of the bylaw. We believe that it's important from a transparency and risk management point of view that this bylaw, which is a very important piece of regulation, does apply equally to all parties working on this important issue.
So I'd like to stress the evidence-based decision-making that we'd like to see more of through the bylaw. The flood protection decisions, whether they're maintenance, construction or vegetation management, must be clearly underpinned by evidence. We strongly urge that we've got updated flood modelling for the city, particularly the Otapuni area. Updated modelling is needed to clearly show how floodwaters are moving through the system, how the flood banks are performing, and whether we've got known or emerging weak points existing in those current flood banks, and what mitigation options are most effective. Without this information, there's a real risk of unintended consequences and misdirected investment. I'd like to specifically speak around the Otapuni, the historic gardens, and the statutory context we have there. The Otapuni gardens are classified as a heritage garden, and they do contain historic, significant historic and native plantings. The area has got ongoing cultural use, including flax gathering by iwi. The park is managed under the Reserve Management Plan and governed by the Reserves Act 1977. That's a statutory instrument which takes precedent over a bylaw created under the Local Government Act. This statutory context was clearly recognised when agreements were originally made between the Regional Council and City Council for flood protection assets in this area. Council therefore recommends that the bylaw explicitly references the Reserves Act and the relevant reserves management plans, particularly for the Otapuni and the other reserves around Invercargill City Council where these flood banks intersect. The vegetation management must be mutually agreed, ensuring that the flood protection outcomes are achieved, but also those heritage values are protected and our statutory obligations are met. And once again, updated flood modelling is essential to support the appropriate and proportionate decisions made in this very sensitive area for us.
And finally, just to close on a few matters just relating to the flood protection network as a whole, there are some historic anomalies where there are major assets which are held, owned and managed by Invercargill City Council. But obviously, as we're all aware, rivers flooding doesn't respect territorial boundaries, and we really strongly support the management of this issue from across the network. So we would like to discuss, and we're just taking this opportunity to signal as part of the long-term planning processes, maybe perhaps sorting some of those historical anomalies out. The city has made massive investment into the Stead Street Stop Bank, also along the east side of the Wahopai, down the Rifle Range, which covers off the other portion of the front of Otara. We would just also take this opportunity to again raise, as we have in previous submissions, the west bank of the Wahopai. When that original update to the Stead Street Stop Bank was put through with shovel-ready funding, it was a joint project. Protection of the airport remains less than optimal in the case of a high surge event and a river flood. Essentially, the water can backflow up that river and across what is a regional emergency asset that would be needed for flying resources in and out of the region. Something we've seen in the recent wind event. In a flood event, we are at risk, and so we request again that Environment South give consideration to that matter. So thank you for hearing our submission. Such an important issue, and we're so pleased to be here just to discuss it with you.
Thank you. I appreciate your thorough submission and beautiful timing. Question from me regarding some of those broader conversations. I'm wondering if you see that some of them might fit within the spatial plan conversations as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
No, it's a very thoughtful submission. Thank you. Well written.
Councillor Morrison.
I'm just really curious around, we've got a challenge with a heritage thing being in a heritage park, or if that's right by the river. I'm just wondering, is there, if we adopt a greater systems perspective of it, might there be other protections afforded elsewhere in the system rather than focusing on the garden itself, maybe further upstream or beyond, things that we might take from an integrated perspective that might also afford protection in other ways. I'm just thinking out loud as a reflect on that possibility, and it's something that we'll probably want to take away if you think that's probably a valuable way to consider it in the future.
Absolutely, that's lean towards that evidence-based approach to see how we best protect all of these areas.
Thank you. Thank you. Nothing else from me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, team. It's nice to see our territorial authority colleagues. Right, so that puts us slightly ahead of schedule, but we might box on. Whakamana to Waituna is next. Sarah Hero. Welcome, Sarah. Just a reminder that you have 10 minutes. Sure. I'm pretty quick. And that you obviously don't need to read your entire submission. You can just
No. Ora tātou, ko Sarah Yarrow toko ingoa. My role is the project manager with the Whakamana Te Waituna Trust. The trust was established in 2018. It's a partnership between Awaroa Runanga, Ngāi Tahu, Environment Southland District Council, Department of Conservation and Frontiera. And the trust partners are working together and with the Waituna community and landowners to improve the health and wellbeing of Waituna Lagoon and its catchment. In practice, this means we develop and deliver work programs in partnership to improve water quality, improve the ecological functioning of waterways, and increase and enhance biodiversity in the catchment. So, not surprisingly, we have a strong interest in how waterways are managed within the Waituna catchment. Through the trust partners and central government funding a few years ago, significant investment has been made within the Waituna Creek to trial nature-based solutions and complete large areas of riparian planting. Our submission raised matters in relation to 2 areas of the bylaw, but I just want to focus on the deeming authority today. So the 2020 bylaw includes a deeming authority in section 6.3, where a resource consent granted by council is deemed to be an authority under the bylaw to carry out the works. This is proposed to be removed in the 2026 bylaw, which we oppose. The council staff comment on our submission stated that for administrative efficiency and certainty to both council staff and to bylaw users, it is recommended that the deeming authority clause is removed from the proposed bylaw. But we think removing the deeming authority does the opposite. It will create uncertainty and be more inefficient by having 2 separate approval processes to go through. And by removing the deeming authority, I'll give you an example. An applicant could go through the resource consent process, which, depending on the proposal, can be a costly exercise involving experts, science assessments and engineering advice. You could go through that process and have the consent granted by council, only to then have authority for the works denied by council if it was to go through the bylaw process. And this could quite conceivably happen due to the narrow purpose and focus of the bylaw on drainage only, flood control. Council, through its own legal advice, which was also in the staff recommendations report, confirms there is no scope for the bylaw to consider ecological values. Council has also noted in the explanatory note of the proposed 2026 bylaw that there is a growing understanding both nationally and internationally of nature-based solutions in general flood management. The council is open to innovative ways of working and has a number of projects in progress that support these new approaches to flood management and the protection of ecological values. So to achieve this, a project will need to embody and be assessed for multiple values, so ecological, cultural, recreational, and drainage. A resource consent process is able to assess and balance values and is therefore a more robust process by which the council consider whether an activity is appropriate. The bylaw is required to hold drainage as the primary and almost only value and cannot consider other values. At worst case, this could prevent projects going ahead once they've gained resource consent that are aiming to achieve multi-value outcomes and that also support the council's aspirations for innovative approaches to flood management. Finally, I encourage the hearing panel to question the status quo of having the deeming authority and what is the purpose for removing that? What is the problem you're trying to solve by having a secondary decision process? That is actually would be less robust than a consent process. Going through a consent process, there's an AEE, it's specified in the RMA what matters need to be considered. It's not stipulated in the bylaw how an assessment would occur, what things are considered and how a decision is reached. So for these reasons, we encourage the council to retain the deeming authority clause in the bylaw. Thank you. Councillor Morrison, do you have any questions?
No, clear.
It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you. The purpose of the bylaw is to manage, regulate and protect flood protection and flood control undertaken by us. So you're wanting, my question would be, are you wanting to add to that protection of ecological values as well?
In terms of what can be included in the bylaw, I can't speak for that. I think that's a legal question. Yeah,
You don't want to add that as part of the purpose of the bylaw.
be great, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I don't think I need anything else. It's pretty clear what you're after. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Right. I note that our next submitters are here, so we will move on to the Federated Farmers, please. Mr. Herrick and Mr. Dillon. As you come up, just reminding you that you have 10 minutes. You can use that 10 minutes as you wish. But it's not a debate. I don't have some questions, but we'll see what you've got to say.
Awesome. Thank you very much for inviting us here today to talk to our submission. I just want to thank Chris for coming along. He's helping me out in this. I just want to start off around the process around consultation, where a lot of our members receive notification in the mail the same day, if not the day after submissions closed. And we understand that the period was extended, but a lot of those potential submitters didn't know about the extension due to restrictions on notifications and social media channels and so forth. So I will hand over to Chris to talk through our submission itself.
Thank you for your time there. Chris Dillon, I'm previous provincial president of Federated Farmers, and I'm a landowner either side of the McCallum River, which incidentally doesn't have any flood control on it. But there is other places that have a lot of flood control. As you would have read in their submission, it's massively important to Southland's economy, as a lot of the productive farmland is on the river plains. So that's why we've gone to the effort of putting in a submission here. Just going to go through a couple of the points that we submitted on regarding stock grazing of the floodways. We submitted the fence direction, and we are thankful that you've agreed with us on that one. There's numerous cases where the fences have been put up in consultation with the farmers. The farmers are the ones that are actually paying for the fencing and redoing the fencing after the floods. So there's many cases where we've got strategic fencing where a minor flood, it does not impact their business at all because they can just temporary fence back. The way they used to do it, there'd be more stock in those floodways at certain times and more dangerous. So it's the local knowledge there that's so yeah, we are pleased that you've agreed with us on that one. We carry on to the health and safety regarding the council staff going on the land. We noted your position is uncertain. Our position's pretty certain. We have farm plans in place which covers all this stuff already. So it negates half the need for any more rules around that. And to carry on there, I'm going to go on to the maps. I fully disagree that the current maps are being taken out. I have a massive issue that the maps keep getting updated and changed without public knowledge. And I do, if there's any reviews of any of these maps, they need to be done in consultation with the liaison committees. The liaison committees are elected by the people on these rivers, and they've got massive local knowledge, and at the moment they seem to be just getting overlooked, and to the point where people don't even bother with the liaison committees because they've just been watered down that much. They need to be respected for the local knowledge that they have in that case. And, yeah. Furthermore to that, last one, when we said the decision making should be left with the liaison committees and it's been rejected, it shows that a lot of this is all about control. It's not about what the public is actually after. So, yeah.
Yep, it's not about what the public actually need as such, and it concerns me that it's just been flat out rejected when the premise of that means that the people within the four walls of Environment South are no more than the local community on the ground. That's what it says to me. So that's a rather concern, and it was a concern definitely agreed upon right across our executive. So, you got any further to add there, Chris?
I would simply take some questions.
I just want to ask one very quick question. Your reference to the liaison committees, do you also see that the catchment groups are as important and have similar knowledge?
Definitely, but the catchment groups aren't all in place yet. They're dotted all over the province, whereas each catchment has a liaison committee, which should be the overriding body of all those catchment groups.
Okay, thank you. Question, Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of just exploring this relationship that we've got flood protection systems in place which represent a networked effect, and that functions beyond a single farm scale. But I also recognise that good farming practices are important as well, coupled with that local knowledge. And one of our tensions that we're managing as we seek the balance is, what do we need from a council to meet our statutory obligations and the expectations of the community versus understanding what decisions can be devolved to farm level. So from your perspective, to ensure that the council had confidence that farm level decisions were being made, how would you see that best being communicated or conveyed to council to give us the confidence that appropriate decisions are being made at each farm along the length of a river that's subject to flooding? For instance, would farm plans, if they were adopted wholesale across the catchment, would that be the best mechanism, for example, that might shine a light on that? Or would you have other thoughts on how that might be delivered? Again, noting that we can't ignore those statutory obligations, but we somehow need reassurance of confidence. If we're going to move away from prescriptive one-size-fits-all rule, we need somehow to address that.
Yeah, I can answer that. Farm plans are based around good farm management practice, and looking after the environment is key to farming, obviously. The second part of your question there, how do you know if it's not? You have a team of catchment managers that manage the rock work and the willow work and the weed control on the rivers. They are going up. That's their job, to go up and down that catchment. So if they see there's something wrong, they can have a discussion with that farmer.
And the connections also with those river liaison committees that are elected members by the public, that the connection to the council. So the connection between Farmers Liaison Committee and Environment South is key.
Thank you. Councillor Evans,
I'm just you've got here just a question around the every owner occupier of land in which any flood control works is situated must keep that any access way maintained to allow the safe passage of council staff contractors. But also I think it's sort of worded, would you agree, that as not to allow damage to access ways over flood banks and things like that.
Absolutely agree with that, right?
Yeah.
100%. The access has got to be at all times accessible for emergency, situations, as well as, access to understand and monitor the floodways itself.
And no one wants damage to.
No one wants to see damage at all, and that's clear. Like, farmers do not want to see damage to the environment. We rely on the environment to operate. So.
And actually, the good relationship with the catchment management, the river management team covers that one off, because they have good relationship with the farmers currently.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, just following that up, actually, in your second last paragraph on page 4 of your submission, you talk about proposed clause 6.5 allows the council to require landowners or occupiers to erect fencing to prevent stock entering the drain that is necessary to ensure the effective operation and integrity of the drain. So you're requesting that 6.5a, such direction from the council constitutes an authority to do so under proposed clause 4.2a. Is that, just to explain that for me?
I'm just struggling with where 4.2a is, sorry.
So in the proposed bylaw 4.2a would be a person must not, without the prior authority of the council granted in accordance with the clause of this bylaw, damage or allow damage to occur. Okay, so you are, I just need to make sure I understand that you are asking for some confluence, for using a watery word, from 6.5a, which is the
Yeah, I understand this.
I just need to be clear what you're asking.
So,
Do you understand?
well, I sort of do, to the fact that the council may by written notice require every owner or occupier of land adjoining the drain to, in time and manner stated in the notice, erect fencing to prevent stock entering the drain.
Yeah.
At the cost of the owner. And then 4.2a, a person must not, without the prior authority of the council granted in accordance with clause 6.5 by this bylaw, damage or allow damage, so do it in a proper manner, not in a damaging manner. So that's what I
Yeah,
can
so we
see
just
by-
I guess we need some clarity over.
And that sort of thing's covered in the farm plans, right? So
Yeah.
absolutely. It's around mitigation and farming techniques to make sure that.
So for the wording of the bylaw, we just need, in your view, we need to make that connection
Very clear.
clear and perhaps
And
clarify.
to add to that, fencing has been in place for the last 25 plus years. And some of the areas that are fenced off are now growing long grass, which actually impedes those drains or holds the water back or causes erosion. And in many cases, there's more damage done by it being fenced off. So you've got to have the ability to get in, fix it and rebuild it. And that's when a relationship with the catchment team is key, to know what you are legally allowed to do.
Sure. Okay, we can comment on that. Yep, absolutely.
I'm just thinking about the fencing issue. Are we likely to have have to revisit this in the future with halter and similar technologies emerging as an additional control measure that might not be captured by this, do you think?
I would hope not. To be honest, we need solid fences still in place, even with virtual fencing, because those things are not foolproof either. They do break down, they do fail from time to time. We have seen that where cows have entered public roads with halter collars on. So, all right, they do fail. So we definitely don't need to be revisiting that into the future with technology.
And the reason I say this was, I expect there may be individuals who suggest that it is suitable or sufficient. But no, it's good to hear that there's probably instances where we don't rely on that technology alone. So.
I mean, technology can see where the fence is, but we can't.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your thorough submission and your time, gentlemen.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. And we have one more before we break. So, John Ferris.
He's called in to let us know that he's on his way, but he's been delayed. So we
might take our break now then, will we?
Yes, we can do. Yeah. Well, otherwise I can see that McCallum is here as well. So.
Oh, well, we could. I suppose we could take Mr. McCallum before 11. Welcome, Mr. McCallum. Rule breaker that you are.
Thank you for taking me.
Sorry, I shouldn't be giving you a special.
No.
Welcome, Mr.
I've been on both sides of the argument, so.
And just while the Federated Farmers people are still here, just acknowledge that there will new postal system and all of those things, we know, has been noted, and we will hope to avoid that in the future. So thanks for raising it anyway. Right, welcome, Mr. McCallum. Reminding you, you have 10 minutes. We will ask questions. Thank you very much.
My opening comment basically is I've been around the river for a very long time. And I have flood banks that have never had water against them. So water has never reached them, even the major floods we've had, or they've never been wet. And some of my highest ground is actually within the flood bank because other water bodies flood to the flood bank from the other side. My comments really are relatively narrow and technical around sections 3 and 4. And this is because I listened to one or two of the submitters previously, but I think this is actually quite a narrow document. It's there for a specific purpose, and that's just to manage your assets. It is not there for the wider conscript of the wider discussion, which is held through consenting processes. So my first comment really is in your definitions, sorry, go there. You refer 3 times to Appendix A, but I've never found Appendix A. I don't know what Appendix A is and who it's referred to. It's not part of this document, so I'd like to understand what Appendix A is and what it sits and what it holds. It can't hold into the prescript of your Appendix A to E, I think it is this document process. This document is a supportive document by itself, and Appendix A doesn't seem to be attached to it in any way. I'm not referring to the maps because that's something different. Secondly, you've got the occupier owner. I found these definitions confusing and somewhat out of kilter. I had to look up what rack rent was, and rack rent is actually the extreme rental charge that can be charged. It could be as high as the purchase price of the land, and I wondered what it was there. So when I sat back and looked at it, you refer to landowner further down in section 4, but you really only have occupied leasee, landowner leaseor. That's really the only options that should actually be in there, and those definitions should be simplified down because they're complicated. What you want to know as council is who owns the land and who is the manager, and that is the occupier. Simplify it, and would be my suggestion to you. Moving on to section 4, you've got a renumbering issue that seems to sit in there. You crossed out 4.1, but then you go to 4.2. So I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm sure your technical staff will fix that. The next issue is landward. Now, I asked my wife this as well, and I even looked up the definition. The definition for landward is land that is leading away from a water body, sea or sea. It is not referred to, as in your staff notes, the inside of a flood bank. So I'm going to suggest in your D, E and F, you're looking after your assets. What you actually need to put there is either both sides of the flood bank or a landward side and a river side. And the reason for that is it's very confusing because your reference there is you're trying to look after the integrity assets with tree planting and activity. And in actual fact, you're actually protecting the other side of the flood bank and not protecting the side that is at high risk, would be my comment. I don't think that wording is correct. And it actually implies what you don't want to happen. So you want to actually look after your assets and the water living creatures, and many times we've heard that this morning, comes up and pressurises the flood bank. You don't want trees there, you don't want recent activity there or other engineering sites that are going to deteriorate your flood bank. I think that wording is wrong. And that's why my submission, I said that it needs to be rewritten. So either regarded as both sides, I could understand if you had it on both sides of the flood bank, the 7.5 metres would actually give you protection, or you introduce the river side and the landward side, you need to clarify, in my opinion. My last point really is And we heard that this morning about river stockpiles. After the recent flood event, we actually gained gravel off an area that was going to cause problems. We stockpiled it. I can't move it with today's fuel prices in 4 weeks. There's no way. The other thing is, if I had another use for it, I can't use it in a 4-week period in the middle of winter. Sometimes I have to wait for crushers to come or other activities to come because I'm in a process of how do I deal with this gravel? How do I remove it? How do I store it? How do I transport it to a further use? And that's why I said to you earlier on, some of my flood banks have never had water against them. And some of my highest ground is actually inside the floodway or flood channel that you referred to in this process. What I'm suggesting is that if it exceeds the 20 by 20 metre management that you refer to here, that it's a consented activity, and the consent picks up, but is it at risk? Is it at risk of major floods, minor floods, or any other matter? That's all I really have to say.
Thank you. A couple of questions from me. If 4 weeks removal time is not sufficient, depending on the time of the year, what would be your?
Well, this is where you have a problem. The last one was within 12 months in the previous bylaw, which seemed to be fine because it allowed you to collect it and then accumulate it and deal with it. This is not commercial use. This is and I had an example, an area of land. I had a major flood go through, and I had a metre of gravel halfway across the paddock, which tapered back in a wedge to nothing. We took that off and stockpiled it, and then we used it over the next 12 months on our own properties, and we crushed some of it and used it for topsoil. So I had to wait some time for a crusher to come. It was on an area that, yes, it has had water across it, probably 6 inches, but there was no risk to anybody or anywhere, and the catchment knew about it, and I had talked to them about it, because that's why we decided to put it, which was handy. I can't put it on the other side of the flood bank because I don't have areas there for that sort of storage. So it was stored in an area that was alongside the flood bank on that particular area, which is not commercial. That this is like it would fit well within the area that you had said here. But I just think that the 4 weeks is too short.
If we're to consider the changing climate and the changing seasons, I just would like your thoughts on whether there would it be necessary to include different timeframes for different.
I think I'd rather have within 6 months if I had a preference.
Right.
That puts the asset on, and then if it's outside of the 6 month period, you need to get a consent to have it stored there.
Okay.
I just think that, let's say you had a weather event in the winter, you would have it dealt with in the following summer. Most of the floods happen in February, January, February. That gives me 3 or 4 months to get it tidied up before the winter. That's reasonable. Should it go through to the next winter? Probably not. If I can avoid it, I wouldn't. So if I'm commercial, that's a very different game because I'm looking at 24/7 operation and I'm looking at commercial use.
Okay. And just one more clarification. The riverside landward side definition, I understand where you're coming from there, I think. But your issue is not with the 7.5 metres, it's about the definition of. Okay.
Yeah, so if you think about your raised mound, which we call a flood bank, you need to protect it on both sides. And there's plenty of photos in ES that actually shows there's been trees growing on it or whatever. You need to look after both sides of it because that's the integrity of it. And I just think it's too narrow. And when I bounced the landward side off my wife and others. They all said to me they were talking about the other side of the flood bank, and I thought, oh, that's not what your intention. Your intention is look after the inside, the floodway part, and look after the bank, and the outside is you want to have it integrity because it's part of the physical process.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Morrison?
Oh, no, I'm just curious. Well, thank you for pointing out that when you have that challenge of stockpiling, it's because a flood event has delivered a quantum of gravel onto your paddocks, your property, and you need to manage it. It's not that you have necessarily scheduled that in your work program and saying, I think I'll have a flood next February and we'll deal with the gravel in the lake. Yeah. So on a farm, modern farm systems, is that the kind of thing that there is the capacity to get insurance for that kind of damage? Because if it is incurring a cost.
No. So insurance has a fee. So you need to work out what you want to have at risk.
Yeah.
If you go around our properties on the RETI, you'll find there's a single wire. It's not a netting fence, for example. We have planned for floods. We understand floods. The reason we took this gravel off was because if it accumulated like it was going to actually cause bigger problems down the track and push water away from where it dropped and push it into a bank, which would cause more erosion, more risk on the other side, because on the RETI where I am, the river actually goes from one side of the flood bank, heads northwest again and heads to the other flood bank. And unless we look after that, we've actually got the flood banks at risk, which is your assets. So what we tried to do was make sure when the water went up, it had clean flow without restriction. Restriction means turbulence, which means erosion.
Now, given that it's not commercial, is it going to kind of be a natural limit to the quantum of gravel that you would expect to have to stockpile? Is that like how long a piece of string?
You tell me what comes down.
Yeah.
Well, like we've taken 6,000 metres off it at one stage, and we've also taken 2,000 off it. We've had to rebuild our infrastructure because it was totally wiped out 2 floods ago. I had big ruts and laneways and that sort of stuff as the water just roared through. But part of my flood bank was not touched. So, you know, if I have that flood bank wet, Invercargill's in trouble. Seriously trouble. So I've got to manage and understand what I have to manage it the best I can. But what happens is that I bring up Paul and say, look, I've got an issue, come and have a look. What do you think we should do? So I'm working with the Environment South on all these issues anyway, and I've actually applied for and got been accepted to do work under this current bylaw, not this one that's proposed here, but under the current bylaw, because I thought I just need to make sure, being an ex-councillor, being a leader in the community, I want to make sure that I fit what is actually permitted. And then if I do need to have an overview, then I've got overview with restriction, that you could consent or permission or whatever you want to call it, that the council can say, yes, I've been talking to this fella, I know what he's up to, he's doing this, this and this, and this is his time frame, and we've watched him do it and it's been done correctly. So it's not trying to work around the rules, it's trying to work within the rules to benefit everyone.
Councillor, you can anything quick?
No, just to thank you that the clarification regarding the outside. I do understand that. I've seen that in other terminology with other TAs and descriptions of carriageway, stuff like that. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Mr. McCallum, I do have one more question. In your submission, you request that authorities either granted or refused should be sent to all landowners regularly.
Yes.
Just to give me
just go back a little bit.
Quick reason for that.
It was found out the need to happen, handwrote it very quickly, got it in within the time frame just.
Yes, appreciating that.
That said, I felt that there was information being held that the landowner should actually know about, and because we have a number of landowner changes, we don't have the long-term generational interaction like we've had before. Names have changed and people come and go, but they don't know stuff. They don't know the history. They don't know what's been applied for or not. The staff recommended that it go on the website. I just need to know as a landowner what has been accepted and what has been refused so that I can manage my business. So I just need a bit more transparency around that. and remind it. And I suggested every 5 years, and it's just basically, this is what has happened. Are you aware? And keeping the communication loop going. That's really what I was suggesting there. And then however you do it, that's up to you. But I was suggesting that there should be some sort of dialogue. Otherwise, we're fighting something in the dark. We don't know where we're going.
Well, you make a good point about the transfer of ownership, I suppose. And
not only ownership, it's management.
Yeah,
because we've got a lot of contract milkers, chair milkers, we've got a lot of Filipino staff. We're now dealing with a multicultural society. Half my staff speak 2 languages. I'm dealing with a very different dynamics, and absentee owners are becoming one of the things that is happening. So we need to make sure that people know. The people on the ground need to know, and I need a format, a way of doing that.
great. Good reason. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that it was a wee bit of a challenge logistically, so I appreciate that you took the time regardless.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ferris, you're next, but we kind of juggled the schedule because you weren't here because we were ahead of time. Are you time constrained? Could we delay you by another 10 minutes while we have? Is that all right? And so you'll be finished by about 25 past. Is that okay? And we'll take our scheduled break, and then that kind of puts us back on track. Fabulous. Thank you very much for that. So we'll adjourn for break, everybody. I'm assuming that we can just leave this the way it is. And is morning tea out there for everybody? Yes. So if you are a member of the public, Thanks, folks. We'll get going and reconvene. And thank you, Mr. Ferris, for indulging the bathroom break that we needed. Welcome. Just a reminder that you've got 10 minutes. How you use that 10 minutes is up to you, but if you'd like to ask some questions within that time, then we need to finish before that. Lauren's got a wee beepy thing, so she'll beep at 5 minutes. Other than that, thanks for your submission and we look forward to hearing from you.
No trouble. So John Ferris, farming in the different Mossburn area. And in total, I think there's about 25k of flood bank, maybe 35k of river that boundaries. There's one particular title which is of concern and needs to be managed. And I think it's actually the only title in the Southland that has all of the land inside the floodway. Okay, it's a stretch between Dipton and Castle Rock. The flood bank goes right alongside the road. So it's 200 hectares and at the moment we winter on it and cut the silage and those sorts of things. So in terms of us being able to manage within the boundaries, I guess we've got a couple of options of removing the food from there and putting it back there in the winter, which in turn is probably a 6k one-way sort of cart, and it would involve, you know, heavy machinery going back over the flood banks in the winter. I don't think it's ideal. I have got bylaw approval and I have built some pads up inside the floodway. To put it in perspective, the distance between the flood banks at that point in the river is about 1.1 to 1.3k. I guess for some background, the flood bank is where it is because the place was in trees and whenever the flood bank was installed. If it was not in trees, the flood bank would have been a whole lot closer. So I guess what I'm getting to is the risk of fast flow moving water when the banks are 1.1k wide is very, very minimal. And I guess what can we do to protect the banks that are there? In my ideal world, we would actually move the flood banks where they should be. I don't think my world's going to be ideal, but how can we manage it so we have food actually stored in there somewhere and still operationally be able to execute what we need to without having to go through bylaw approval on an annual sort of basis. And without, look, I agree with protecting the flood banks and looking after them. We need to do that, there's no doubt about that. But it is the only title, I believe, that has the whole thing is inside the floodway. And that, to put it in perspective, if we remove the food from there and put it back there in the winter, I think we'll damage the flood bank. The actual cost of that will probably be around $350,000 to $400,000 every year. It's not all about that, but it is about a balance of finding a way through managing that. Yeah. Apart from that, what council's proposing, yeah, I don't have too much problem with. But in the ideal world, I wouldn't have to get bylaw for something I do every year, and need to keep doing it from an operational point of view.
Question,
Yes, so thank you for the submission. It's quite good to understand your situation as such. I like the idea of storage at a higher level. It's very good. Do you work with the catchment team much? That's one of my questions I was going to ask. Yeah. Okay, so that's a good thing. Yeah.
And that works well, and we store it there as much as we can. But to be honest, like, we do need to get it off there to prepare somewhat. And I guess it comes down to quantity at the end of the day. If we've got a small quantity placed ready to feed for a short period of time, I don't think that'll be an issue. Yeah, for sure. If we've got 3,000 bales inside the floodway, that's an issue, and we can manage that. But I think I'll have to get bylaw approval for that every year, or I don't know the exact rules around that, whether we can or yeah. If you read it, I'm pretty sure we can't prepare at all. Like it says no, it's a blanket, no storage inside floodway. That's my understanding.
And can I just,
Yeah,
sorry,
go for
guys,
it.
can I just clarify, when you say, because I've heard the word bales and feed, are we talking big round bales,
So
wrapped in
some,
plastic for feeding?
yeah, some bales, yes, I try and minimise that and do silage.
Okay, so, yeah.
Silage.
So we're talking silage pit, silage pad?
Silage, yeah.
Okay. And is that above ground as opposed to something else?
Yeah, above ground.
Yeah.
And absolutely on the highest points. Yeah, the 2020 flood, there was no water. We drive through them in two-wheel drive vehicle. And that's the point, I guess, when you're talking a 1.1k spread area, chances are very low. And I just don't want to get caught up with some legal stuff we have to do when we can manage it without that, if you know what I mean.
Often when we are focused on managing a particular risk in the landscape, sometimes we put blinkers on us and we don't see other risks. Even the challenge of moving feed. There's emissions, for example, in a climate change model. We're trying to reduce emissions. There's another dimension that can potentially argue there's a negative outcome from this. I'm kind of interested in, do you have an idea of what would be the cost to you of having to, if you have to do it annually? What does that impose upon you cost-wise?
Move the food?
No, if you have to do the bylaw, you have to follow the bylaw provision and in order to get permission.
Oh, I don't think, no, I don't know, to be fair, but I would suspect to talk to Paul Pollard and Grant, and I don't know, usually the council has $600 or $1,000 or something that you have to apply for that. It's probably the logistical issues or the lack of freedom to farm, I suppose. And I understand why council has these rules in place. I'm just not so sure whether, and it is only this particular title, whether the blanket rule is quite valid.
It reflects, I think, one of those tensions where you're trying to find rules that fit in most places.
Yes.
There's always an exception.
Yes, I get that.
Yeah, so what you're currently doing fits within the current bylaw, I'm assuming.
Not really. That's my problem.
I don't want you to dob yourself in, but
no.
I need to be clear that.
Yeah, no, not really.
Okay, so
and catchment board, I've kept them in the loop. They've been pretty good, real good about it actually. There hasn't been an issue, but if someone really wanted to go hard, then there would be an issue.
and given that we can't predict when the weather goddess is going to do something different, I guess we need to keep looking forward to how that might work for you and
move the flood bank.
Every yeah, okay.
It might sound crazy there, but honestly, if you came on site and had a look, it's not crazy. But,
you mean move it in or out?
And close to the river, because then I'll have some land inside the title. Yeah, because there's literally nowhere from the flood bank to the road, 8 metres, the whole title.
I would suggest that, given what you're doing currently, probably a deemed authority would probably be suitable in the current bylaw definitions. So, if you've looked at those and think that they would be suitable, it's great. Thank you.
No, thank you for coming in. I just one other question. It would be good because we drive that road a lot. Well, not currently at the moment because the bridge is out. Can't come through there. But it's quite interesting to know what's on the other side of the floodbank, and it would be good to sit down and talk. And
100%.
Some stage, but nothing to do with this. So, thank you for coming in.
So can we get the opportunity to do that at some stage? Because for us it is quite I know for the region.
It will be nothing to do with this hearing and on the bylaw, but it will be at a later time, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and given that you're obviously in good communication with the catchment guys, it's the important feedback loop, really.
Yeah.
The catchment
Did you have
guys
a
can
question?
contact me.
Having said that,
All good.
thank you very much for your time and for indulging our slight reschedule. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
No drama.
thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ferris, could I could find out from Paul Pollard, but can I just confirm where that title is?
It starts at
Sorry.
While you're doing that, we'll call up the next submitters, which are Wilkins Farming.
Oh, yeah, Drew. Yeah. Oh, okay, with Drew. Yeah. So,
Oh, Sarah. Sarah, are you there? Welcome, Sarah. Sorry, we're slightly discombobulated with timing, but appreciate you waiting. Just a reminder that it's 10 minutes and you can split that either way, but we'll possibly have some questions, so please allow time for that. Other than that, thank you very much for your submission and we'll let you speak to it.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd just like to put an apology in for Sean Wilkins. He intended to speak today, but he's been held up on farm and unable to make it to the hearing. Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, that's fine.
Sorry. Firstly, I'd just like to put an apology for Sean Wilkins, and he was unable to make it in off the farm to make it to the hearing today.
Cool.
We understand farming is an active process. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Sarah?
Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm having some trouble with technology.
Yes, we can. Can you hear us though?
Yes. Yep. I can hear you. Sorry about that. I went through the staff report and the proposed amended bylaw after the submissions were received, and the first few points of our submission have reasonably been answered in that staff report. Primarily, the biggest thing that we would like to see is that people can still sensibly use the floodway. Obviously, neither of us want rank grass developing, and we still want to be able to utilise it for appropriate farming activities. In part 4 of my submission, we talked about the landward side and that being quite a confusing term. I've been listening into some other submitters and believe that's been a topic that's been brought up today already. The response in the staff report about it being plain English, I don't think it's really satisfactory. It's quite a confusing term. And it would be great if that ambiguity could be removed, given that this is a bylaw that's used a lot by farmers themselves rather than professional support people in the agricultural sector. So, we'd really like to see some clear definition there around it, particularly because a flood asset doesn't have to be a flood bank. It can be at times a pump shed building, for example, and what would be the landward side of that if it's surrounded by land. So that's something we'd like to clarify. And then furthermore to that, we'd just like to touch on some of the wider topics that we talked about in our submission, particularly around the development of crack willows continuously causing issues during flood flows. We experienced that in the 2020 Matara flood. Crack willow directed flood flow into the flood bank and created a significant stop bank failure on one of our properties that created significant cost to everybody. And another topic that we'd like to also talk about is the consistent gravel accumulation that's leading to permanent vegetated beaches within the river floodway. These vegetated beaches dictate flood behaviours when a river comes up with higher flows, and it creates resistance, forcing energy into the bank sides and creating further erosion, which then contributes to water quality. Concerns that can then be blamed on land user activities rather than the actual erosion occurring within the floodway. We'd also like to talk about sediment that's building up within the floodway. This is between the stop banks and the river beds. We're finding that ground levels in that area is often higher than the ground level immediately outside of the stop bank. And this would be affecting cross-sectional areas and flood system capacities from our point of view, and should be something that's a topic for council to be looking into further. And we'd also like to highlight the interpretation of the Matara Water Conservation Order, which is often applied to many consents in the Matara catchment. We believe that its use is becoming broader and broader, and it has a wider reach than its original intent. Another topic for us is planting of exotic trees in our catchments at large scale plantation size, and what kind of long-term impact that's going to have for water quantity available for minimum river flows. Minimum river flows affect the ability to use water within the Matara catchment water resources, and that when minimum flows are affected further, that's going to create greater farmers in the catchment. Thank you. That's all my comments. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate the breadth and depth of your submission. Councillor Morrison, your question?
No, it was all pretty clear to me, acknowledging that some of those issues you touched upon relevant issues to the River Management Act that may also spill out beyond the initial or focus scope of the bylaw. Useful to hear those. So thank you for the detail in the submission.
No, thank you. A very good submission. No questions, very clear. Thank you very much for the submission.
Would also like to acknowledge the fact that you've looked through the staff recommendations already and are aware of that even. And made it clear that that's okay. So thanks for that. I don't think we have any questions actually, apart from to reinforce Councillor Morrison's points about some of the broader issues that you've raised. But we also need to be mindful that the bylaw decisions we make have impacts across the rest of the organisation. So that's a good reminder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to come in remotely.
Most welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This should put us back to a scheduled sequence of events so that I don't get any more confused more than anything. We're CB and SL Stewart partnership. Stacey Stewart. Thank you. We're about spot on actually. So welcome, Stacey. Just a reminder that we've got 10 minutes. Thanks for your submission. Look forward to hearing what you've got to say to support it.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stacey Stewart, and I just thought it'd be really useful to explain my background that I feel it relates to my knowledge around my submission. So I worked for Environment Southland for 17 years, primarily in hydrology, and I served as a flood duty officer that entire time as well. So I kind of developed a strong understanding of how water moves through our river systems and how water behaves under pressure and how flood assets are relied on during those events. In my current role, I currently work with farmers and community groups on practical waterway improvement projects. This gives me day-to-day on-the-ground experience on how riparian planting functions in small streams and drains and how the right species in the right place can slow water during rainfall events. Reinforcing vulnerable banks, reducing erosion and sediment trapping sediment before it moves downstream. These small waterways respond quickly to rain, and even relatively modest riparian buffers can noticeably improve the behaviour of channel stability. So that my background kind of helps my strengthen my view that on one size fits all rule doesn't reflect how systems actually operate. So just on a personal note, 100% of the waterways that pass through my farm are classified as catchment drains, so are under the bylaw. So that also means that the mitigations available for my freshwater farm plan pretty much don't exist under the current rules without having to apply for authority. So just for farms like mine, the current blanket restrictions leave room for improvement, little room for implement effective low-risk environmental improvements. So I just wanted to reiterate some of my main points from my submission. So just the 7.5 metre blanket vegetation rule is too blunt. So I fully support high priority protecting high quality flood assets. I've seen how they work, but my kind of main concern is just around the really small waterways. We're talking like 2-3 feet wide. Is my main concern. So those waterways don't carry the same hydraulic risk and require clear blanks. Some require clear banks, but others would benefit from setback riparian planting to stabilise those banks and reducing sediment and slowing the flow. So a blanket rule removes the ability to tailor management to the actual behaviour of those systems. My next point probably is around the authority process. It'd just be really good if it was more enabling and not deterring good practice. So while the bylaw technically allows for riparian planting through the process, the reality is that the current system is complex, slow, unclear and unpredictable. So I think it'd just be good to see some rules around how we can make that easier for like your first order drains, your first order streams, so that it's the start of the river network, there's no risk to properties upstream or infrastructure. It'd be really good to see some stuff in place that would just make that a lot easier for farmers. And then I kind of just really touched on just aligning the bylaw with the freshwater farm plans. So right now the freshwater farm plans rely heavily on actions of small drains, shading the weeds, shading for weed suppression, bank stabilisation and sediment control and buffer zones. But right now the draft bylaw unintentionally blocks or complicates many of those actions. If the two frameworks remain misaligned, then farmers cannot meet their freshwater farm plan requirements and the region cannot achieve meaningful freshwater improvement. A risk-based system potentially using stream water to inform this approach would solve this issue. And then my last one's I've been doing a little bit of work around inanga spawning, and I don't know if anyone are aware, but inanga, so they're a keystone species, and they spawn in a really tiny section of river near the saltwater wedge. So it'd just be really cool to see if we can maybe set some restrictions around some of the work so that we avoid those key spawning times so we can protect that species. And just in summary, I just kind of feel like in 2026 a one size fits all approach is probably something we can do better than that. And I just want to reiterate that I do support protecting high priority flood assets. And yeah. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions. Thank you.
Quick question from me. So do you not see that the opportunity to apply for an authority allows the flexibility that you
like? Just in my experience, we spoke to someone from ES about what we could do on our property, and it just seemed like everything was just in the too hard basket. Yes, you could do this, but it was uncertain, and like farmers are busy. Like if we could reduce some of those barriers, and maybe for those class 1 streams, that would be amazing, and you'd get so much benefit. But yes, I don't know if authority exists, but I just haven't seen that it's an easy process for farmers to go through.
Right. How would you suggest we made that easier?
I think in my submission I put just having some just like publish a clear times down service levels. So like, i.e. like 20 working days, some really transparent criteria around like some planting templates, the class drain. Yeah, just maybe just some templates and some plant would be really good. Just so farmers knew that, okay, this is a class 1 order drain. This is the type of things we could do, and then go to the council with that, could we do this? Whereas right now, because it's so open, you don't know what you can and can't do. So even starting is difficult.
So some templates, as in form templates.
Yeah, possibly be like, this is a class 1 stream. This is the type of things that we could look into without too much difficulty, essentially. Just making the process easier, I feel.
Yeah, sure. Some of the other submitters have also suggested that we include suitable riparian species for the different parts.
Yeah,
so would
awesome.
that sit with you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Stacey, thank you, because I think your submission was probably taking quite a strategic perspective of it, and what your submission does seems to suggest or express a kind of a different design logic than what we're currently using with kind of a blanket-based rules approach, and you're kind of looking for different categories of drains and more tailored rules depending on the catchment context, perhaps. What that does, of course, for us at this end, that introduces a level of complexity that we would then need to manage. But I mean, do you see that there's potential to step into that and a more sort of migrate to that over time?
That if the council would consider that, that would be amazing. I just kind of feel like in 2026 we know better than to apply one rule to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that there would be potentially resource and technical dimensions and staff dimensions to a change in how we approach it fundamentally. But I absolutely understand where you're coming from in terms of taking a differentiated approach for different ways.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Not really a question. Thank you. I'm just highlighting the reference here in the draft bylaw. It looks like in the appendix it's been changed, which is good.
Okay.
Thank you for picking that up, and very good submission relating to ecological as well as the drainage. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. We appreciate your time. We know how much time goes into these things, and speaking to them can not more time. So thanks very much. The Director General of Conservation. It sounds ominous or impressive. I'm not sure, or both. Welcome. Representatives of, I'm assuming, the Director General.
Yes, exactly.
Just reminder, 10 minutes. Appreciate your submission.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present at this hearing on behalf of the Director General of Conservation, submitted number 11. Firstly, introductions. I am Jane Bowen, Technical Advisor Freshwater, and this is my colleague Pat Kaufman, who is Ranger River Restoration for the Marahiku District. Unfortunately, we are unable to have any planning staff or legal counsel to attend the hearing today, and due to other commitments. So we apologise for this inconvenience this may have for the panel. However, I can provide a summary of the key points in contention to the Director General of Conservation submission, with both myself and Ms. Hoffman being available to answer questions that the panel may have in relation to any technical matters in respect to river restoration projects and impacts of weed and sediment control in general. If there are any specific planning or legal matters that the panel have, we're happy to take those matters away and discuss these with our planners and get a response in writing to assist you. We are not the expert in these matters, unfortunately. So the DG supports the Council's officer's recommendations in general, and we note that our requested amendments, where the officer has recommended these be accepted. We welcome the opportunity to work with the Council in providing guidance on what is suitable grass cover that is to be developed and identified in the explanatory note following clause 4.2. I did just want to clarify though, often what is referred to as native grasses actually include your sedges, rushes and tussocks. So I hope that would be considered and being included as well, and potentially some of our lower growing native species. There are 4 key points in contention that the DG would like the panel to further consider, which I'll go through now. So our first point, so this is our definitions, page 3, drain or drainage network, subpoint 9011. The DG supports the reinsertion of the maps into the bylaw and to apply the 2020 definition of drain, as these are clearly shown on the maps. This is because this provides clarity and certainty to the bylaw user. The DG disagrees that if the maps are not included in the bylaw, then the proposed definition for drain is maintained. The DG considers that the proposed 2026 definition is unclear, uncertain, and with the council officer clarifying that the definition is not intended to extend to natural or unmodified watercourses, the DG strongly seeks to retain the bylaw's 2020 version of the definition of drain. In doing so, there is no need to clarify what is deemed to be maintenance as raised in the DG submission. We have a couple of suggested wording that I'll read now. So drain means a channel, either artificially constructed or a modified watercourse, which is used to manage the water table for the purposes of this bylaw, means any drain is shown in Appendix 2. Or, and the alternative to reflect the ownership, management by or on behalf of the council, as in the 2026 bylaw definition. Drain means a channel either artificially constructed or a modified watercourse, which is used to manage the water table that is owned and or managed by or on behalf of the council for the purposes of this bylaw. Means any drain is shown in Appendix A. Sorry, a lot of words. Yes. Our second point, definitions, page 3, floodway, subpoint 11011. The DG agrees with the officer's recommendations and amendments to the explanatory note. Our planner just wanted to point out there's a couple of typographical errors. Administered should read administered, and councils need an apostrophe after the L. Our third point, explanatory note, page 1, penultimate paragraph, subpoint 13111. The DG supports the council's officer recommendation to amend the bylaw summary section to include reference to the code of practice for river works. It sets out the activities undertaken by the integrated catchment management team. This would clarify the good environmental practice that is referred to in the second to last paragraph on page 1 of the bylaw as sought by the DG submission. This is currently not shown in the recommended changes in the council officer's report. So the DG seeks that a footnote after good environmental practice is included to reference the code of practice for river works that sets out the activities undertaken by the ICM team. Now our fourth and final point, clause 6.4 in regards to removal of trees or vegetation, page 6, subpoint 30111. The clarification provided in how council undertakes this assessment of considered under this clause is still considered too subjective. Any requirement for removal should be supported by an appropriate assessment with decisions based on a formal risk assessment or clear evidence-based rationale. For example, what matters or criteria are looked at during a site inspection and in any assessments of drainage function, access and flood capacity to determine if there is a risk to infrastructure. If there was some clear guidance that can be referenced to in the bylaw to provide clarification and transparency in how the council undertakes a formal risk assessment. While I note the staff recommendations state that there is no scope in the bylaw to include the benefits of riparian planting, it is important to consider in the scope of this clause that I've just mentioned here. So I would just like to briefly expand on the importance of riparian planting at this point. While the council managed drains are clearly important for drainage and flood control, and clearly that function needs to be maintained, these drains also provide extensive habitat for indigenous fish and invertebrates, including at-risk and threatened species. Riparian planting plays an important role in supporting those ecological values. The vegetation provides shade, which moderates water temperature, as well as terrestrial inputs like insects and leaf litter that form a key part of those aquatic food webs. Overhanging plants provide physical habitat, cover and refuge, and riparian vegetation in these lowland areas, which are often within these drainage areas, are essential for inanga spawning, with inanga being a threatened species, which is present within that drainage network. Riparian planting could also benefit the drainage network by reducing erosion and stabilising banks in some cases. So my point is that the ecological values are present in these council managed drains, and really need to be balanced alongside those drainage objectives as well. So I note that my colleague's Pat has extensive experience with dealing with restoration activities within the drainage network. So I'll pass on to her now for her comments, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a few comments. I'm directly involved in several river restoration projects, both on public conservation land and on private land. And so I work alongside the East Catchment team quite a bit and have for many years. And so I'm interested in drainage management and flood control activities at sites where there has been a bylaw approval, where ES is aware of riparian restoration projects on the go, and how that drainage management work is managed in those situations where ES is aware of those projects. So I would like some assurance that where a planting plan has been approved under the bylaw or through agreement in some other form, that those plantings won't be removed through drainage management activities. If we've gone to the effort of discussing with the catchment team what we'd like to do and they've agreed, we'd like some assurance that those plants won't be driven over or removed or damaged wherever possible. And I understand that in emergency situations, sometimes that's unavoidable. Related to that, we'd really like to see more transparency around how the need for drainage management activities is assessed. For example, how does the catchment team know that drainage capacity has been reduced and that it needs to be increased? How do they decide what level of activity is required to bring that channel back to its drainage capacity, whatever it is that their standard is? So more transparency around that. How do they decide how much overhanging vegetation they need to remove from a site to bring it up to their standard? And I'd like assurance that good environmental practices will be applied while they're doing that work. So really, and the last point is really around good communication would be very much appreciated, particularly at special sites like Waituna, where the high values are recognised, where the restoration work is well known and has been done in partnership with Environment Southland. We'd like to see improved quality of communication around the drainage team's activities there. Thank you.
Covered quite a lot of things. Colleagues, question?
Just regarding 6.4 with relation to removal of trees and vegetation. My question would be, under your thoughts, in a situation where we have multiple willows fallen over in a river or a floodway, as you say, still attached, even though they're laying in water and still growing, but no way of getting to those trees to remove them. And considering that the bylaw is for the protection of our flood resilience and our flood banks, what would be the best way forward in your mind to remove those trees?
I absolutely accept that willows should be removed in that circumstance, and from time to time it's absolutely essential to go down into that river and remove them, and sometimes damage does happen. I accept that.
Okay. We have situations where that is not the case. We're unable to do that. So that's fine. That was just my question. So thank you. Because there is so many different scenarios regarding vegetation. So I just wanted to highlight that as another scenario. Thank you.
Councillor Morrison.
Only, I guess, are there any specific provisions in the bylaw that you think would constrain conservation work in the current setting?
Yes, just in relation to, I can't point to the number clause or anything right now, but just in regards to controlling the type of planting that can occur within that network. And I do understand that it is really important to balance those drainage concerns, but I think that especially if we're working together, we can find ways where we can include good native riparian planting while not reducing that drainage ability as well too. I think in terms of identifying suitable grass cover that might be able to be planted without a bylaw approval would be a really good way to go around that. And as I discussed in my notes, hopefully that can be extended to not just include your proper grasses, but also your sedges, your tussocks as well. So, yeah.
Jane to add to that?
I don't have any further questions. I think your submission is pretty clear. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. And you'll hear from us.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we hopefully have got Mr. Shaw from the New Zealand Transport Authority.
Not online. We were expecting him online.
It's Dave Marshall.
Mr. Marshall, we might let you jump the queue while we sort out the online version. If you'd like to come up now, we can give you our full attention. Welcome.
Thank you.
Just as always, you've got 10 minutes.
It won't take 10 minutes.
Okay. I can't say that sounds good. That would be unprofessional of me, but.
I've just had the proposed 2026 flood control management printed off by your lovely lady up front, and you've snuck me in 10 minutes early, but let me get my knitting in order.
That's all right. I also have nothing to alter.
I have a few more questions and clarities on what you're on the proposed bylaws. And look, first of all, I'll apologise for my submission was pretty rough and ready. It was done on short notice. But one of my biggest concerns is stock grazing from 1st of June, it says here, to the 31st of August each year. Was it not originally May to September? So what I strongly believe is each case should be considered on a individual case by case situation. I don't think you can actually apply one set of rules right across the whole Southern Plains. And the example would be if we have good growing seasons into that, you're going to have excessive grass on the banks and they're going to need grazed, where you've got a law there that bylaw that basically says you can't. Now, these authorities, we talk about a grazing authority. I hope this isn't some kind of money snatching part of an operation that we have to go to compliance and spend $600 every time we want to graze the strip of grass that we've just paid $30,000 a hectare for, and you're going to want $600 to say, yes, you can graze it on such and such days. I have a major concern with that. And I also have a bit of a concern with the 7.5 metres, which is 15 metres. I've been away this morning with one of your works officers looking at the 15 metres. yes, I understand why you have it in some places, but I can also seen a lot of places where there's no fence, and under good management, the bank is actually in the best shape in any place. So I do need to think that saying it's compulsory that we have a fence at 7.5 metres out each side of the crown, I really would like to see some discussion on that for the bylaw to actually work properly. I'm not saying it's not, it's necessary in some places, but not in others. And the rule needs written so that it can be discretionary. The other thing is, I notice authority on who has authority and doesn't have authority. So does EF's operations staff need to gain an authority to do a bank inspection or any work on the bank? That is a question that the council need to ask and have a decent discussion with their staff about. Because I'd hate to think that our inspection crew have to apply to consents to go and look at their bank. And the way it's worded, they do.
Can I interrupt you and just ask you have you got that in front of you?
I have.
Which wording are you referring to?
So here it says, so like authority 5.1.
Yep.
Access for inspection and maintenance purposes. Does that cover council staff, or who does that cover?
Which 5.1 A, B, C, D?
Oh, sorry, B, sorry, 5.1B.
Thank you.
Yeah, access for inspection and maintenance purposes.
Oh, I see. Mhm.
Yeah, does that include the staff, that they can actually go and look at that, or how does that fit? The understanding I was at is that the operations crew will need to apply for an authority to inspect and manage their banks. I would just leave that. The other question I do have is structures. Now you talk about structures as bridges and restriction within a floodway. I think you need to be very careful how that's worded, because I stood under a bridge this morning that somebody needs to really have a bit of a tidy up. It's got a lot of structural issues, or it's a structure that has a lot of issues, I should refer it to, as in piles of gravel stacked under it. Is that legal, or is that not legal? Or who's responsible for it? So the bylaw needs to be very careful when it starts talking about bridges. Does that include a bridge on a state highway, or are we talking about a bridge on over a wee stream? So that's about me.
Can I just return to I think it was the very first point you mentioned about the restrictions on grazing period?
Yeah.
Can you just recover that for me?
Okay, so look, in here, I was led to believe it was going to be May to September, but in this actual paper it says June to end of August. I would think it could be better worded. Look, July is our lowest rainfall month. So if we have a period of time, July might be totally suitable to graze a bank, but September might not. So if the ruling could be made in some way on damage, pugging or something like that, other than saying that you can't graze it for 3 months of the year, would be a lot more user-friendly for both council and occupier.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand you.
Yeah, without being long-winded about it.
Councillor Evans.
No, I've written here, good operators work well, but sometimes rules are written to protect all of us from people as well. So, you know, the question is, there are some very good operators and there are very good people out there, but the rules are put in place for everyone to include not optimum.
This is something that you've brought another point into my mind.
Oh no, sorry.
The mapping of council-owned banks and private banks needs to be really looked at. So I had to get a bit of an interpretation this morning, on some of this. So I rang one of your past engineers for his. Now the bylaws have been put in toe-to-toe of bank. I don't see that anywhere in here, that it's talking about toe-to-toe. Also for bailage storage, we talk about a floodway. Floodway, I take it as outside the bank, but we need some clearer descriptions on where bailage is to be stacked. Sure, we can't stack it in toe-to-toe from bank to bank within banks, but there are also areas outside the bank that you can't stack bailage as well. So I just would like to see a wee bit more work done on some of this. Please.
I just wanted to clarify with you, 4.2, the relating to the timing that you've mentioned. What you say makes sense in many ways, but the wording of in the bylaw, the proposed bylaw, is a person must not, without the prior authority of the council,
So, yeah, but when you read through
graze stock on flood control works from the 1st of June to the 31st of August. So it's not saying you can't do it ever.
No, it's not, but what it is saying is you need authority, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now.
So for your, sorry if I'm interrupting, but I'm aware of time.
Yeah.
So for your example, July might be really dry.
Yep.
Which also can cause damage to the asset, right?
Yeah.
So having the team go out and assess whether that's a suitable time for that particular thing for your authority, would that not meet your requirements?
Yes, it would. But are the people that are inspecting this bank, are they going to actually have the expertise to make the right call? And this is a problem that I have. I'm strongly in favour of a bylaw change to stop flood banks getting damaged. I'm strongly in favour of that. I just want to see it perfected so that there's no outs for people. I view one every day that has been grazed and hammered and beaten the shit out of. And I want to see that stopped. But I am concerned that one, there's a Queen's chain involved. Two, that your maps don't totally cover the bank successfully. And three, I don't think, without offending anybody, apart from one or two of your compliance team, I don't think anybody actually has the intestinal fortitude to go up to a cocky and say, take your stock off, you violated the law, we're going to prosecute you. And that's what needs to happen. But there is so many, it needs to be very precise on what you and how you do it. And I don't think this law, what you're proposing, covers it. You've got to be able to prove damage.
I could offer you some replies, but that would be outside.
Yeah, no, you can ring me
outside the scope of the hearing. But I'm painfully aware that our new integrated catchment manager person is in the room, and that we had a really comprehensive discussion about this in the integrated catchment management committee meeting yesterday.
Yep.
So
cool. We're on the same line.
Although it's slightly outside the scope of what I'm supposed to do, I suggest you watch the recording of that, because that will give you a really good overview of the expertise that we are building.
Cool.
Thank you. Have to stop
You can
talking about
stop.
that
You can
now.
stop now. Thank you very much.
It's not a question.
Thank you, Dave.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in.
So do we have Mr. Shaw?
We're just trying to get him up. It's there might be some technical issues, but we've had it confirmed it's not on our end. So oh yeah, here we go. Yeah.
He's all right at his end. So we are now running a few minutes late. YL Fisheries, are you here, Claire? Are you here? Oh yes, I'll just get you. I'm just alerting you that we're about 10 minutes late, Claire. So I'll see you. Yeah. Thanks. Where are you? I can't even see you. Oh, there you go. Welcome, Mr. Shaw. Thanks for your technological patience.
I think it was probably technological incompetence at my end, I'm afraid.
Oh well, if you're willing to wear that, that's great.
sitting in the meeting room before the meeting room. Yeah.
So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you to illuminate your submission. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. My name's Richard Shaw. I'm a planner for Whakamana, New Zealand Transport Agency, and our submission was effectively just really trying to seek some clarification around the potential implications of the bylaw review to NZTA in terms of our operation of the network. There's extensive overlap between the state highway network and all of the assets to be managed through the bylaw. The state highway network crisscrosses the plains, and we have bridges across many of the rivers and definitely many of the drains that are covered. I guess the starting point for us is, up till now, the application of the previous bylaw has not been a problem. That may be a concern that we haven't applied for bylaw approval as it seems would be required when I read the text of the bylaw, but I needed to start with that point. We haven't had an issue to date with the application of the bylaw. How we do operate the network, predominantly in the maintenance and operations, so the more low-level interactions with the managing the state highway network, we tend to rely on permitted rules in the plan primarily. The whole network is designated under the district plans, and we try hard through planning and policy processes to get practical rules around maintenance and operational activities on the network, so we can do those as permitted activities, and we do seek specific consents for larger projects, and we have a range of consents across the network for managing structures and waterways around structures. So we've benefited previously from the deemed bylaw approval, I would suggest, from the previous bylaw. But we have also proceeded with a range of permitted activities that would interact with assets that the bylaw would seek to manage. In terms of implications of the changes to the bylaw, I would suggest that there are a range for us that would require bylaw approval for a number of sites where we have existing consents and have benefited from a deemed approval previously. And I suspect, given the scope of the bylaw controls around, specifically probably around earthworks, where the state highway network and works that we are proposing on the state highway network overlap with the bylaw managed assets, flood control work assets, then I suspect we would trigger and need a bylaw for reasonably minor works. So I'm thinking of minor earthworks, for example, that are in close proximity to floodways or structures, and this will primarily be around bridges. If that is the intent, then I suspect that is something that Whakamana would have to deal with. What we sought in our submission was some acknowledgement that there is a threshold of activity, standard type maintenance activity, that shouldn't trigger the requirement for bylaw approval when we're operating within the state highway network, dealing with standard operational maintenance activities. And that was the primary purpose of putting in the submission, to get some clarity around how the regimes that we have for state highway management and control overlay and mesh with the bylaw requirements. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Perfectly timed. The 5-minute bell just went. Questions? No. Yes.
No.
No, I can see your concern with regards to, say, 4.1 and relating to infrastructure, the authority of works to be completed under the bridge. So thank you for your submission. It's a good understanding from that. Thank you.
I don't think I have a question really. I note that clause 4.1 is of concern for you, the exclusion of the council from the authority process, and that you would request that you be included in that.
That was seen as a mechanism to avoid, as a potential mechanism to avoid the need for multiple bylaw applications for small scale operational and maintenance work within the corridor. So it was seeking, that was one option, seek an exclusion via us being determined as a person authorised to do works within the corridor subject to the bylaw.
If 4.1 was removed, how would that sit with you?
5.
What would be the alternative?
The alternative is around an acknowledgement that it's probably in relation to 4.2, DE and F are the ones that we would be picked up with reasonably frequently. Just some acknowledgement that there is a scale of works for infrastructure providers which shouldn't trigger the requirement for a specific authority. So if you take this to its worst conclusion, if we were filling in a pothole or doing some earthworks to repair a small piece of road and it interacted with a floodway, was within the setback, then strictly we would need an authority. And I don't think that's what would be intended. That was the point we were trying to raise. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I asked because other submitters have suggested that we remove 4.1 completely. So we just need to find a way.
Well, the hearing report didn't go for that option. So it's not an option that is being supported at the moment. Us being considered a person authorised to do these works on the state highway. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It has highlighted something, and especially when we look at 4.2, clause 5, we're applying for authority to be being integrated in bit of 4.1 or something. If you know what I mean. So it's going back to, I think it relates back to clause 5 to initiate something. So
we will deliberate
we'll
on
look
that,
on
Mr.
that.
Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for the opportunity to do this remotely, and sorry for the mistake, the trip up coming in.
No worries. We've all had that happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Right, Claire, representing the Waiau Fisheries and Wildlife Habitat Trust. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you. I've got some hard copies of the document I sent to you this morning, Lauren, if that would be helpful.
That would be fantastic. I'll add it to my small pile of paper shuffling. Just while you're doing that, Claire, reminding you that we have 10 minutes. We are in the second last one.
17 very much. All right.
So this is the second last.
It's already started.
Hello, my name is Claire Jordan, and I'm a contract planner presenting to you today on behalf of the Waiau Fisheries and Wildlife Habitat Enhancement Trust. Thank you to Environment Southland for the opportunity to present to you today on the drainage bylaw and for accepting our late submission. The trust was set up as a community negotiated outcome of the Manapoti Power Scheme resource consent process in 1996. The trust's purpose, outlined in its deed, includes the restoration and enhancement of fisheries and wildlife habitat in the Waiau River catchment, as well as education, advocacy and public access. The trust submission on the drainage bylaw was that the bylaw be amended to include a mechanism to enable parts of the rated drainage network to be removed if they no longer needed regular drainage work because they were in a QE2 National Trust covenant, or there was sufficient outfall provided after decades of maintenance work, and are only providing drainage outfall to a single property. The rationale for this is primarily ecological, as there are parts of the drainage network that the Trust has worked with landowners and often the QE2 National Trust to restore and enhance habitat. The Trust's investment is protected by QE2 covenants or habitat enhancement agreements. These are a contractual arrangement between the Trust and landowners to support habitat restoration. In these locations, the process of drainage clearing fundamentally undermines the object of this work by destroying habitat. The Trust acknowledges that at a broader level, drainage clearance is necessary to maintain the flood protection network, which is why the Trust's proposal has been limited to only those drains where there is either sufficient outfall or the decision to remove the drain from the bylaw would only affect a single property. In addition to the ecological benefits, there may also be tangible rates cost savings associated with removing the rating for drainage maintenance where that's no longer required. SARF's response in the recommendation report was that any determination of whether a rated drain should be removed from the drainage network is outside the scope of the bylaw, and that other mechanisms of council will be able to address the requested amendment from the submitter. However, with the maps proposed to be explicitly included in the bylaw again, my understanding is that a review consistent with the Local Government Act would be required to make any changes to the map, i.e. to remove drains from the bylaw. This means that it is even more difficult to remove a drain from the bylaw than it was under the draft bylaw that the Trust submitted on. The Trust requests that Environment Southland reconsider the Trust request in light of the change to include the maps within the bylaw, or consider an alternative mechanism to enable drains to be removed from the bylaw for ecological protection purposes, where there will be negligible impact on the broader drainage network. Thank you again for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thanks, Claire. question, councillor Evans?
No, thank you very much, Claire.
Councillor Morris?
Okay, no, thank you. I absolutely see the thrust of the submission, so thank you for that. Right towards the end there, where you mentioned in your speaking notes that drains are to be potentially be removed from a bylaw for ecological protection purposes where there will be negligible impact. How would you suggest might be the appropriate way for council and other stakeholders to consider or assess that impact and to agree on whether something was negligible or otherwise?
I mean, I think you need to take technical advice on that. But the initial proposal was around the drain only providing drainage outfall for a single property, with the idea being that if that landowner was comfortable at undertaking ecological restoration and protection work in conjunction with the trust or not, that they would be on board with that drain being removed from the drainage network as well, and it wouldn't affect anybody else.
And perhaps a follow-on question, and I may be at risk of revealing my own ignorance on the topic here, is who gets to designate a drain within these networks? What's your understanding of that?
I mean, I think it's an excellent question. Because they're part of the bylaw, I guess essentially Environment Southland does.
There'll be staff in the room who will probably.
Yeah, I'm happy to
later on.
to be educated on that point as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so following on from that, and a single property is working on a wetland restoration and therefore want the drain removed from the map, one would assume that that is the consultation process, that changing the maps if they're embedded in the bylaw, that would cover that consultation, maybe.
I guess you need to consider it against the requirements in the Local Government Act, whether that would be sufficient. I don't have those front of mind, but they're fairly comprehensive, is my recollection.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm just trying to work that through in my head. Possibilities, because and I could be wrong, but it's pretty hard to map all the drains in Southland, I've been told.
I'm sure that's true.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, thank you for coming in, Claire.
Great. Thanks very much, Claire. That's
Short and sweet.
Helpful. Which takes us to the Fortuna group. Mr. David Dudsky and Rosie Hunter. And we've got one online and one in person. Mr. Dudsky, we're covering all.
I'm not Rosie.
Oh, you're not Rosie. Covering both bases.
Yep.
Very good. Have we got Rosie online somebody?
Yes, she's up there now.
Oh, hello. Can you hear us, Rosie?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Can
you hear me?
Welcome both. Just reminding you that you have 10 minutes.
Yep.
To illuminate us.
That's me on the big screen.
Thank
Whoa.
you.
Yeah, who are we? We're Fortuna Group, FGL, and our philosophy is covered in 5 words: pride, cash, and doing what's right. We've had ongoing battles with the council catchment division for over the last 5 to 7 years around double-sided riparian planting. But we've had great support from others in the council, including the biodiversity team. Going forward, we know we're going to have higher rainfall events, and we need to embrace nature to help us with a solution around this. And I see it as 3 different areas of our catchment. The upper area, we need to slow the flow of high rainfall events coming down. The middle catchment probably keep going as is, and the bottom catchment, I think over the last 40, 50 years, Regional Council have done very well in opening the streams up so floodwaters can get out to sea as quickly as possible. We definitely need to work with nature because it's far more powerful than man. And you need to try and reduce, if not eliminate, the mechanical cleaning and unnecessarily work we do with council administrative drains. So I've got real good examples on our properties. We've got drains that we haven't mechanically cleaned for over 30 years now, and they've been riparian planted both sides for that period, and there's absolutely no build-up of sediment. They're gravel-based, and they're like that year in, year out. So it's a good example of why you should be using riparian planting. We all know that riparian planting does stop the overland flow of sediment, which is a major cause of contaminants. But the other one, probably less known, is the application of artificial contaminants, i.e. fertiliser, going directly into open waterways. And this is why we need riparian planting on both sides, and probably more than the 1 metre or just vegetation, grasses, that's mentioned in the current bylaw. So every year there is probably thousands of tonnes of fertiliser applied directly into open waterways every year, because there's no barrier to stop them. There's plenty of trials throughout New Zealand from ECAN and Environment Waituna around the benefits of double-sided riparian planting, shade, aqualife, stopping contaminants, as mentioned. So section 4.2, FGL opposed that. We think it's a draconian law, not fit for purpose, and doesn't work with nature. We want to plant both sides of all open drains. It's an FGL policy that we do this on our own farms. There's no reason at all why you can't mechanically clean these drains if it's required. Section 5, we also oppose. We think some farmers should be able to earn the right to be trusted with council and do what's right for the environment, and then council monitor their activities. Yeah, trust but verify. Today, over the years, farmers, particularly dairy farmers, have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in environmental enhancement, yet it seems that the council, catchment division, haven't come along, and they don't use technology or the current vehicles available to be able to mechanically clean drains that are double-sided planted, which is pretty disappointing. In conclusion, please, hey, policies, bylaws are set to motivate behaviour to drive the right outcomes for all stakeholders. I ask the individuals motivating an activity, if the money was coming out of their pocket, would they be thinking of a better way? And I'm sure they would. We need to all work together as individuals, together, iwi, dock, fishing game, end users, farmers, recreational users, and registry authorities to do what's right for the environment and the people of Southland and New Zealand.
Thank you. Rosie, did you want to say anything?
No, Dave's has done a really good job of highlighting it. And yeah, we're just keen to do the right thing and keep things simple for us so we can get on and do our good environmental work.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Morrison?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and because you're drawing attention to a tension in the system, which is how do we enable a wider set of ecological outcomes while also managing that important part of flood protection. And I was just reflecting on your comments that actually when we can enable farmers to do the right thing, it actually supports both resilient businesses, resilient environment, things like provenance become available to farmers and farm businesses and supply chains. And I was just interested in your observation that there might be technological solutions that we could be investing in that enable the likes of different ways of doing maintenance. And
yes,
ways with this double-sided riparian planting.
So for sure, riparian planting will reduce the use of mechanical cleaning, without a doubt, saving the council millions and millions over the time. Yep. So these days, they've got long reach diggers, they've got cameras, they've got radios, walkie-talkies. You can mechanically clean a fairly major drain with reasonably major riparian plantings around it fairly easily. And yes, it does take a little bit longer than having no plantings there with a clean slate where sheep graze right to the waterways. It's easy. And this is the issue. Grey-headed contractors have been doing that for 40 years, and anything different to that, they're not very happy with because it's been easy. But hey, once you put riparian planting, you do not have to mechanically clean it very often. Proven on one of our farms, 30 years. And if that was a council maintained drain with no riparian, they'd be going up there every 2, maybe 3 years. Just doesn't make sense.
Thank you. I don't have any questions either, really. So with that, I would say thank you very much for your time and for raising a perspective that perhaps we haven't heard this morning.
Thank you. Yeah.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that takes us to 4.5 minutes past time, which I'm quite pleased with, all things considered. And we'll adjourn for a lunch break and begin public deliberations at 1:30 this afternoon.
I'll leave this here.
Thank you all very much for your time and effort thus far. The hard part, come on. Thanks very much. We will adjourn.